Today, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for the world premiere event for Rosetta. And today, I'm joined by Cody Williams. Cody, why don't you introduce yourself?
For people who don't know, my name is Cody Williams. I'm part of Team Runaways. I think I was asked to be on here because I got second at a calling earlier this year for heavy hitters, which is the same format as the calling for Rosetta that we'll be going to in like 2 weeks or something like that. Pretty excited for it. Besides that, you'll see me at every major event that you ever go to, and you've probably maybe seen me on the Runaways podcast. And if you haven't, I'm going to plug it here. You should go check out the Runaways podcast. It's pretty great. I only say that because I host it. So, but I don't have to host this time. I get to be the bothersome person on the call, make the funny faces and stuff. So,
So I
but I
guess
do
I'm just going to
appreciate
cut
you
out the
having me
where to
on.
find you part at the end.
Yeah.
We're just doing plugs now.
Yep. I got to get them while they're still listening to the video before they click off of it. You know how it works.
Honestly, part of it was the calling. The other part is I think you're like actually one of the best minds on the team for cracking limited format, figuring out what's actually going on, what are the moving pieces, how do we actually solve this format. You're really good at we talked
Appreciate
about
it.
making this video like a week ago, but just yesterday I actually made the decision to actually go to this event. I wasn't planning on going up until now. Believe it or not, this is my first world premiere event I've ever gone to, so now I'm relatable to the viewers. So teach me, how do I do well at this event, senpai?
I mean, we'll see. One, I really, really like sealed callings, like sealed events in general. I find that they're a lot of fun because I know there's like a lot of luck with like opening packs and like what you're gonna get and things like that. But I look at it more like it's like a challenge. Like you're sitting down, you have a limited pool of resources to work with, which is all the cards that you open. And then like you have to find a way to win with this pack. And winning with sealed in the new format. The old format was different, but in the new way that sealed works feels very rewarding to me. Where you're just looking at your packs and you're trying to craft something, and then the games really matter. Like the gameplay and the games
Mhm.
matter. And then at an event like a calling, you get to do sealed on day one, and then day two is all draft. And draft for like a brand new format is like the Wild West, and you really get to flex like a lot of skill. I found in those type of formats to try and top. And my biggest regret for playing this game is that in my first year, I just didn't go to the sealed callings when it was like Monarch and all the other things, like
Mhm.
or Tails at the time. Like that's my biggest regret because I remember I remember Michael Fang won one, and I'm like messaging him on Discord. I'm like, dude, you have to draft old him. Just grab all of the Earth cards that you can possibly get and just fatigue everyone. He's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if that's a good strat. And then like it pops off and like the first calling that he went to, that's the winning strat is just like old him with Earth reacts.
Mhm.
Um, and then the next one he's like, okay, yeah, I should have done that. And he goes and he just like wins the second one, which was great. But it was like that's like my biggest regret. It's not going to those because I was like, I don't know if they're high enough EV. But now I
Mhm.
just go to everything.
Kind of going back to your thoughts a second ago of like it flexes certain muscles. Another thing that's interesting, specifically for these, where it's a world premiere event, is you're flexing that muscle of trying to figure out what's going on before there's an established metagame of what's going on. It's okay, I'm reading some of these cards for the first time, or I haven't actually sat down and played games. What are the synergies? What are the interactions? How do I win games? What actually matters in the format? How should you be like looking at the set when you're sitting down day one? Like what should you be trying to like figure out or think about when you're evaluating the cards for the first time?
So, I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at this. I think the most important thing is to try and figure out what type of format we're playing. That's by far like typically number one. And we've seen a bunch of different formats, whether we're playing, for example, a fatigue format, which is possible with everyone being limited to 30 cards, I believe will still be the case here. That's usually indicative of a really strong weapon that's able to be swung continually, and then also good defensive tools that allow you to outlast your opponent. So
Hmm.
looking at if we have a fatigue type setup, do we have a bunch of elusive damage like we had, last format in 2 formats ago in heavy hitters where you had the reactions to go over the top? In this case, it might be like arcane damage. If there's not any good protection or good enough protection against arcane damage, you can look at that. That was something that we saw in Tails, where Briars started incorporating some direct burn spells into their Briar deck to just finish off the last couple of points as a form of elusive damage. And
WTR
then
was also kind of like that. Okay, I have these reactions at the end of the game that I'm going to try closing. Skip that grind.
yeah, also with dominate as like their other way in that format as well. So trying to look at the format and be like, are we racing a bunch? Because we've had that. Like the five format was just like two fives going at each other, racing in sealed. So is this a racing format? Is it something in between? Is it a fatigue format, or is it something in between where it could be something like kind of like Misfail, where I'm looking for one powerful turn to try and win the game off of. Honestly, we've seen almost none of the cards in the set. So it's hard for me to even look at this and see, see what it is right now. But once we
Mhm.
finally get to sit down, it might just be like, hey, there's like a synergy built up. You get this one massive turn off, and then you try and close the game after that. And let's see if I got the pieces to do the big turn. Those things are possible. You kind of want to first step, I think, identify what type of format we're even playing.
What would
Yeah,
you say are some good examples of weapons causing the format to lean one direction or the other?
weapons with repeatable 1 for 3s, 1 for 4s would be, or 2 for 4s. Any weapon with a 4 attack on it is just completely broken and sealed in almost all cases. But we don't typically get weapons like that. But just like even it's just good enough if you can just swing like a 1 for 3 weapon without like a cost to it. For
Mhm.
example, I'm thinking of like Max's. Hey, this you got to swing it. Max has had like a restriction on it. But just like a 1 for 3 weapon that you can continually swing with a bunch of 3 blocks and some healing is like that's pretty good, close to like a fatiguey format. And we might have that. I think we have a repeatable weapon, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to relook through all of them again.
It looked like they were some hoop jumpy weapons so far that we've
Yeah,
seen. Like one of them was if you made an aura, the other one was I think if you played a lightning card or something like that.
yeah,
And it
yep.
was an extender. So it kind
And the
of
other ones
reminded
were
me of
Ron's.
Emberblade.
So
Yeah, yeah,
yep.
yeah. The lightning weapon really reminds me of Emberblade, where it's like this like middle of your turn type of thing that you're trying to do so you can go wide.
But I quite often don't try. So outside of Tails, I don't really, and Tails Sealed was a different ball game completely as well. I don't really try and play the fatigue nearly as often in these type of formats, simply because you're trying to play, especially when other people like the format just comes out, you don't know what's going on.
Hmm.
You're trying to play the best deck that you can play that pressures your opponent into having to make plays. So if you're playing the fatigue format, like the fatigue deck, that can be great later once you know all the cards in the set, you know all the combos, you know everything that can happen, because then you can tailor a deck that can handle all of those issues. But on
So you'd
opening
rather
weekend,
be asking the questions than answering them in this
absolutely,
sense. So
especially
if
in the first weekend. Yeah.
so if that's the case though, and you're sitting down, you got your what is it, 30, 60 minutes at the world premiere for deck building? I forget. You sit down, you get your pool, and you start evaluating. Like, what are you start trying to look for in that pool to start trying to do that of asking questions? Like, is there certain
So
types of interactions or card effects that you're looking at?
yeah, so I'm looking at cards that deal damage my opponent can't deal with. So I want to look at cards and say, is there any way for the if this is a reaction, are there D reacts in the format? They're not. Okay, like this reaction gets in. This is true
So
damage.
evasive
Um,
damage.
evasive damage is the first thing I'm looking for because that's how you steal games, like with evasive damage. And that could be arcane. Arcane could be considered in this format evasive damage, right? So evasive damage, then good numbers is what I'm looking for. So 3 blocks are very important. Being
Three
able to
block
put a good number in
slam.
front of a good number. And then also we're looking at like the how big do the attacks actually go? Are they 1 for 4s, 1 for 5s, 1 for 3s? Are they 3 for 7s? Because seven power is really strong, as we know in like heavy hitters. So I'm looking to see like what are the break points on the attacks look like? Are those something that can be blocked, cannot be blocked? Because the higher the damage threshold, typically the more important the 3 blocks are. I don't think a lot of people think about it that way, but it's like if someone can swing at me for like 5 4 5, then like every time I have a 3 block and they don't have a 3 block and we're both just trading the same amount of numbers back and forth, I'm actually gaining advantage on defense.
Mhm.
And your defensive block is always there. So if you have like a 1 for 5 that requires you to have go through a trick to give it go again, it's not always 1 for 5 go again, right? It's sometimes it's just 1 for 5. But the 3 block is always 3 block. And so if your hands can be more consistent and you know that you're both outputting similar damage types, then you get your advantage through having better defensive numbers.
The other thing to mention too, there you like touched on a little bit of is it a 3 for 7 or is it a 2 for whatever, 1 for whatever? Is thinking
Yeah.
about like what does your cost curve kind of look like too, and I think something to consider there is like what is your how does your weapon fit into this cost curve? What other cards are you looking for there as extenders to like how am I actually playing all of my cards? Like I remember that being a big thing during Uprising of like okay, my weapon costs 2. Well, if
Hmm.
I want to play my whole round with a blue, then I really am just looking for ones and zeros. Go like one cost, weapon, zero cost, something like that. And then I
Yep.
can play all my cards, maybe block with a card, maybe arsenal card, but I got to play everything. If I have a two cost here, it doesn't quite fit that curve as nicely.
Yes, definitely trying to figure out if we're playing on a one blue pitch meta. Like, does the deck want to operate every turn on one blue pitch, or are we in this like weird like you everything's so expensive you need two blues? That's like a whole different game that you're trying to play. If you're like, oh, well, our weapons are two and we have these other combo cards. Okay, then maybe we're looking at like a combo based metric here if we need two blues. And so
Hmm.
now it's like, how can we make the other turns allow us to find a turn to play two blues? Because
Or you
it's
could
pretty
have a set
hard.
like MST where it's like a gimmick in the set is having blues. So it's like, are you
It's
supposed to
having
lean
all
into the
blues. Yeah.
gimmick?
Yep. I will say it's pretty funny. My rule of thumb when I go to these events that are the first look is I typically just want to ignore the gimmick unless the gimmick is incredibly powerful. And I think we saw that at like MST calling, the one that happened in Japan. We saw that like most people, most decks were just ignoring the gimmick. Like new wasn't heavily played, and then we saw that the Zens were just like, I play good attacks, and then the only like transcending that was going on was really just happening from the Enigma players at that event. Sometimes if you're unsure if the gimmick is good or not, you just kind of go with what you already know is good, especially at these events, and that can still pay off. You're not like putting anything on the table. Like you're
Yeah.
not
And that
losing
like
anything by doing that.
goes into a bit of a point I want to bring up too of this is like a heuristic from Magic that I remember back in the day of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. If you don't know, just don't overthink it. Just do the thing that works for you. Like you already said, just let's just be efficient. Let's do my thing, not worry about the gimmick. Just three block slam your opponent out of the game. Sometimes you don't need to figure out the format. You can put the onus on your opponent to figure it out and say, hey, I'm just going to do this, which is an okay strategy. And it may lose to someone that's hyper efficient, but it's the first day of the format. Uh, Prove to me that you've solved the format on the first day. I don't believe you.
Yeah, quite often you get a lot of value out of just playing really efficient cards and playing in a way that we know already works in this game, especially on like the first couple of days, and then and putting the onus on your opponent to just be like, can you deal with just normal flesh and blood? Where I'm going to have play a thing with go again, and then I'm going to play another thing, or I'm going to block
Mhm.
with two cards, and I'm going to throw a 3 for 7. Like I'm just going to play normal flesh and blood with a couple of like spikes here or there, maybe some elusive damage to steal. Can you even deal with this? Because they might be trying to do all the gimmicks, and you might get a couple of free wins on your games by people who are trying to do too much, and you're just keeping it really simple.
Let's say you're like me and this is your first world premiere event and you're trying to figure out I want to do good at this event. I actually would like to really make an honest try at the calling and try to do good. What do you think are some things that I could be doing now to prepare for this event? Because preparing for a brand new set kind of difficult. The set is physically not out yet. How do you actually prepare for it? And there are some things that you can do. What do you think?
So there's a couple of things that we can do now that might help for the event. One would be to go back and look at past events and see what typically did well at those like world premiere events. Like what type of decks, what type of strategies, like what type of plays that you're
Like
watching now.
you mentioned that a minute ago
Yep,
with MC. You're like, oh, like some people just weren't interacting with the gimmick. Like that's a great example. Like just looking back and seeing what were people doing back then. Was that even correct?
exactly. Yeah, and you can go. What I was going to say is you can go back with the knowledge you have now of the format and apply it to then, and be like, oh, what were people not seeing then, and maybe even looking at what the gaps were and trying to apply that to the new set. As cards come out, get as familiar with them as possible between now and then. I think that's really important. We do have kind of those like jumpstart deck that came out, or First Strike, I think they're called, that with the new hero, and you could play some of that to just get a feel for how the new hero operates. I think there's some value in doing that as well. I mean, the biggest thing is be there on Friday. There's like 3 sealed events on Friday that are going to be happening. Like you want to be in there. You want to be doing all 3 of those sealed events, and you want to be trying what you think is great, trying the stuff that you're going to be too afraid to try at the calling, right? Like in some of those, and you want to take those decks and you want to go with your friends afterwards, and you want to play games against each other that night with those cards. That'll supplement a lot of what you do
I had no
for
idea
the
there was
calling
even
as
three
well.
sealed events. I guess I'm doing that
There
now.
are 3 sealed events on Friday. I'm like already signed up for all 3 of them. And I'm like, this is a lot of practice before the calling on sealed. Like you can figure a lot out. from
Well,
those
I
three
guess I know
decks.
what I'm doing after this. I'll throw a link in the description for other people to re-sign up to.
Yeah. Uh, so that'll be very important. But before that, I would take a look at what did well in the past formats. I think there's a lot of value to be gained when you're try and look at it through the people's eyes of their first time interacting with the format. What ended up doing well and what decisions people had made when they played. And I think MST, the one in Japan, is like a good example
Yeah,
of that.
Michael also had like a nice part during that where he even like opened his sealed pool and talked to the camera, explaining his thought process on things.
Yep.
I think that's actually like an important part too to like already have down before you sit down of make sure because you're on a clock. You have a limited amount of time to do this. So being able to like quickly go through your packs and parse through all that information as fast as possible if you're unfamiliar with the cards, like that's going to save you as much time as possible for actually deck building, figuring out what the correct thing is. Because I know for me when I was doing MST sealed, all three of my heroes at all the pre-releases I went to were very close in power level of the cards that I
Mm-hmm.
opened. So parsing through the info of, oh, what am I actually supposed to play here? Ate up a lot of my time, and then I still have to build my deck. Like already knowing how am I going to sort this? Like, am I gonna just do class sorting, or am I gonna separate out certain things? Like, what am I actually like looking for as I open the pack? Are there signpost cards that I should be looking for as I open that are my reason to go into a specific hero? Like, we saw in MSC, like a good reason to go into hero might be the equipment. The equipment was very powerful. Where in another set,
Yeah.
it might be kind of whatever. Like, who cares? The equipment's kind of replacement level.
Yeah, I mean at heavy at the heavy hitters calling, I actually was sitting there trying to choose between am I going to go warrior or am I going to go guardian? Like I was sitting there looking at my packs. I had a lot of good guardian, a lot of good Victor stuff. Like I could have played Victor, not Patsy. I could have played a good Victor deck. And ultimately I just was like, I don't know how to win with this Victor deck. Like I have good armor for him. I have like I have good stuff for this deck, but I don't know how to win with this deck. So I'm just going to discount it. I'm just going to play warrior because I know how to swing two weapons and I know how to use reactions. And glad I did because then I made day two with that. Like, and then just continued to play warrior the whole event. But like, I think stuff like that you just have
Ook,
to
ook,
be okay
ook.
with.
Weapon go again,
If
weapon pass.
yeah, if you look at a thing and you're like, I don't know how I win with this, or I can't see the deck here, don't sit there agonizing back and forth. Just get rid of the one thing and then focus on making the other thing that you've decided on as good as you possibly can. Like spend your
Mhm.
actual time doing that.
One way I think you could get some practice in too for this, like I mentioned before, like kind of parsing through the info of like, what do I have here? What this is a lot of new information you're taking in. Is actually shapeshifter sealed. It's a good way to flex that muscle of like, okay, I may have seen all these cards before, but I've never seen all these cards together before. Like, oh, well, oh, if I play Briar, I can actually use the Guardian auras to create embodiments of lightning, and I just never considered that interaction before. And it's like trying to like flex that muscle of looking for cool synergies that you just wouldn't think of if you're just looking at raw numbers on cards. Just if all you do is go, yep, 3 for 7 slam, you're gonna miss out on a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm still hoping one of these days at an actual event I get to play Shapeshifter Sealed because
But
that's
you've
like
never
one of
played?
the things I've never got to play it. It's like Shapeshifter's always like I'm always in a tournament at the when it's going on, and it's like, please, on day 3, can you just have Shapeshifter Shield sealed for me so I can go play it?
Okay, maybe we'll bring some packs to an event sometime and do that after.
I've just never got to. It's like the one thing in the game like I'm just like I really want to be able to do this eventually.
All right, Cody, do you have any closing thoughts on this? Any other ways that you want people to prepare?
I just think just have fun. The number one thing is a lot of people get frustrated with sealed because oh my pool's not good enough. This isn't good enough. Like it, it they've really done a lot to fix that issue. I
Mhm.
will say by you're not allowed to play legendaries anymore. So you can't just like the top 8 isn't just everyone who got a legendary. You're getting way more packs and you're limited to 30 cards. I think this fixes a lot of those gripes. You're going to be able to play a powerful deck. So now instead of the thought of, oh, what if I don't open anything good or I just don't open anything well. It's more about like can you find the good deck in the 8 packs? Because there will
Mhm.
be a good deck in there almost every time. And then can I play the deck to a level that lets me win games? And I think if you go in with the expectation of I'm going to have some limited resources and the skill I'm trying to use here is using those limited resources to win games, I think you'll have like a better mentality at looking at the format and how to actually play the format and feel good about what you do accomplish in the format.
Yeah, if this is even anywhere close to MST for sealed, it's going to be a ton of fun. That was the best sealed format I've played in Fab this whole time. It was having a side deck was so refreshing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was so nice. Like, oh wait, I don't just have to slam every 3 block in my deck and make a pile. Oh, I can cut my bananas. Oh,
Yeah, it was nice to actually feel like you made mistakes or you made deck building mistakes like after you got done with some sealed and you're like, man, I could have done this better. I think I could have had a better plan here. I think I could have sideboarded cards better in these matchups. Like it was actually interesting to think about. And there was like actual flaws versus in the old one, you're like, well, my opponents opened legendaries and I didn't. So this format's gonna be hard. And like that just doesn't exist anymore. And with 8 packs, you really get enough to find something that's
Mhm.
good.
Oh, that just gave me a random thought. Also, like you sit down, you make your deck. Consider while you're playing your games too. Was there any synergies that you saw your opponent do that you hadn't considered yet? And then
Yep.
go back into your deck and adjust it. Like, oh, I hadn't even considered using for example, in the last set, this mystic card that way. They just showed me a whole new way to play this card. Do I have the tools to do that? Oh my god, I do. Slam, put it in your deck.
Yep. I mean, that's what Friday's for. Friday is so important for this. Like, don't just like not play your games or oh, you want to split and like not actually play. I think playing the games are super important, especially on Friday if you're trying to do well in the calling. Because like I want them to show me what they're thinking. Show like I want to play the deck that I'm thinking about that I built for that, that sealed event. But I more than that, I want to see what my opponents are thinking. What are they building? What are they putting together?
Mhm.
What could I steal from them for the next day? So if I'm ever in that situation, what
Yeah,
felt bad to play against?
yeah,
Yeah,
please beat me. Please beat me. I want to know how I lose
yeah,
so I can take your tech. Thank you. So the big
exactly.
brain
That's
play is lose every game and intentionally so no one takes your tech.
yes, yes. On Friday, just lose every game.
Tickets are fake. All right. Well, I agree. Have fun. Make sure you have fun. That's the ultimate big thing. It's a sealed event. It's basically a pre-release. Have a good time. But yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would
Thanks
say,
for having
is
me.
there anywhere that people can find you? But you already plugged that at the beginning. So yeah. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Peace, YouTube.